Welcome to the Rebooting Show. This is a live edition from Cannes. Thank you to GroupM for hosting us here in this lovely studio. We're going to talk about a very important issue today, which is the future of the news business when it comes to advertising. And to do so, I want to introduce our panelists. First, David Kostman, the CEO of Outbrain. David,
Hey,
thank you.
Hey, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Kate Scott-Dawkins. Kate is the Global President of Business Intelligence at GroupM. Just came out with a big ad spending report. A lot of good stuff in there. We talked about this earlier. I want to get into it because there was less good stuff when it comes to publishers. I hate to say that. And Johanna Mayer-Jones, Chief Advertising Officer at The Washington Post, which is not in the news at all these days. And so we're going to talk about why this is that ads and news increasingly just don't seem to mix really well. And it's really important that that problem gets solved. So Kate, I want to start with you because of your report, because this is the data side, and it's good to have a grounding in data. When I got the report, I was saying, wow, this is great. This is great before Cannes. The ad business is growing, like 7.8%. You revised
globally,
it up
yep.
globally. US,
5.8%.
5.8%. This is all good news. A lot of up and to the right in there. Out of home is up quite a bit. Obviously, CTV streaming is up quite a bit. Retail media,
Retail's
massive.
a big one, yep.
And then I went down like quite a bit. And
I'm just loving the vibes there.
it got to, well, it's sunny outside, but not in here.
No shit.
So, but then I got to like the publishing, and it was newspapers and magazines, and the digital extension. What did you see there?
It's a little bit of a different story with print, and we've seen, there very much the graph goes down and to the right as you progress in time, and it's because a lot of the features, things like classifieds that were a mainstay of the news, are now more and more handled by digital platforms, which we measure, some of those like a Carvana or something separately within the digital piece of it, right? So those types of places have moved into the digital atmosphere. And so it's, globally flat-ish or just behind inflation into this year and next year. And so there are holdouts, Germany and Northern Europe, actually, where you have like Finland strong paper pulp exports. Yes, they love a newspaper.
They do. I wish everyone was like the Swedes. They'll just subscribe to anything, like any sort of like report about
So
like
nice.
subscriptions. The Swedes, the Danes, they're just like they just take out news subscriptions and then go to their country homes and make coffee.
Is that what they're doing?
I think we could just finish there. So take out subscriptions, go to your country homes.
But it's a challenged environment, I think you say in the report. And I wonder what Johanna, I mean, you see it every day. There's a lot of blame to be put on keyword block lists, but obviously there's a lot of distribution challenges right now in news. I mean, at the end of the day, you need attention in order to monetize that attention through advertising. And if the way attention is being measured via visits to a web page are going down, then your advertising is going to be challenged. How do you diagnose what is going on right now in the ad market when it comes to news publishers specifically?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to start with the fact that news is not a monolith, right? The news category encompasses lots of different verticals and areas of coverage, everything from sports to games to geopolitics to obviously the elections to community news. You talk about print. We have a local print product that's really connected to the DC and sort of surrounding areas, and it's a very important part of that community life. Is it our fastest growing product? No. But I do think actually when it comes to our print product, we buck some of the trends that the industry is seeing. But this is not a print conversation, this is a broader conversation. So let's start with the fact that the idea that news as a category encompasses everything feels a little antiquated. And that if we're really to build a healthy ecosystem for the news business, which I also think we can all agree on, right? We all agree that we need trusted journalism as a fundamental part of a democratic society. I mean, I believe in that. I believe that you believe in that.
Yeah, no, I'm in favor.
You're in favor.
I'm not
of
going
that?
to take the other
Shall we-
side.
shall we-
David,
we're
you
all
take
in-
the other side?
We're all in favor. All right,
No, in favor.
let's establish some shared principles here. Then I do think you have to be a little bit more sophisticated than the way that you think about news as a category. Now, of course, block lists have had a big impact on the digital advertising business for news companies. And I see some good work being done by some of the sort of more established players, but also some really cool, interesting startups that are beginning to think differently about how to provide brand suitability tools. But first and foremost, I think we have to stop saying news is this big category and it's bad for advertisers. The data shows that that's not the case. The technology is starting to help us get better at providing brand suitability and brand safety environments, brand safe environments. And altogether, it's part of our responsibility, if you're in this industry, to find ways to support trusted journalism. The reality of it is that we are on a massive moment of change. Yes, of course, the Washington Post is in it right now, right? We are in the middle of our redesigning our future, but the whole industry is in a moment of massive change. And if we don't actually get in front of it and start to have honest dialogue and conversations, then we could be in a situation in a decade, in less than a decade, where trusted journalism, trusted news, trusted environments for brands has really decreased.
Yeah, I was talking to someone actually here earlier, and he made the point that it was almost like climate change, and that like we might all of a sudden look back and be like, I can't believe we let this happen. And it was happening as, it's happening in front of us.
I mean, it really is.
And so, David, how do you diagnose the issue? And break it down between like how much is a product issue, like how much is it a business model issue, and how much of it is almost a communication issue?
Sure. So first, I think I was thrilled to participate here because of all the reasons we just mentioned. I mean, it is a really important thing for society, for all of us to help trusted professional journalism thrive. And I think we can all agree on that. And I think the implications on society are really going to be very damaging if we don't do that. So I think we need to ensure that we change the narrative. We are trying to do this through narratives of bringing brand dollars back to journalism, and I think this is an important effort for all of us. So I was reading Kate's numbers, and I had exactly the same. Wow, exciting, it's growing, and then it's declining, Then we get to our part of the world. So first I was trying to separate between print and digital publishers, so maybe it's not as bad as you said. Right. I would say, we're a public company. I can't give forecast of numbers, but we're global. But we do about $1 billion in advertising, 60% outside the US, 40% in the US. We see in the second half growth. And we're very dependent on the publisher industry. So we do see on digital growth as we focus. But so specifically, and I think we need to look at news is very broad. And we face it a lot with advertisers who want to block, and then we need to talk to them and say, if you want to block, let's not block news publishers by their title, but let's at least, the minimum we can do, and that's easy with product, is just block segments if you don't want to be next to certain news pages. But then I think we can do more as a tech company, and we're doing more in terms of even that. I think we need to educate the market, communication in terms of these news pages, even the news pages, not the lifestyle or entertainment. This is sort of obvious. Why wouldn't you be okay to be next to an entertainment or lifestyle or sports page? There's no content there that's controversial on I don't know, the sports section.
Even the hard news, I've not seen, to your point, I've not seen evidence that says consumers are, think more negatively about a brand if they appear next to news. That evidence just doesn't
exactly.
exist.
So I think taking that, and then let's go to the core of the problem, the hard news pages, and how do we change that? Because that is still, if you look at percentage of the total traffic goes there. So it's a really valuable audience that's from a demographic point of view sort of interested in that. So there's a lot you can conclude on that audience from the context, and we're doing that to really create better targeting. We came out with something called predictive audiences, a lot of it based on context. And then I do think we can limit the blocking to really pages that are problematic. But if there are brands and CMOs and agencies that just say, I don't want to be on a title of a brand that is a news, I mean, that's very problematic for society, and that's something we need to communicate and work. And I think this podcast is one of the ways to impact.
I mean, I think there's lots and lots to discuss in that. A couple of points that I do think it's worth focusing on. The first is, and you sort of both mentioned it, which is around audience. When we're talking about news as a category, and even if it is in sort of more of the core news product, you're talking about a highly engaged, highly influential audience paying attention to content that can influence perhaps their professional, but certainly their professional and their personal lives, right? And that mindset, that level of engagement, that type of audience is hugely valuable to brands. So that's the first thing. I think that if you approach it with an audience-first mindset, then you can very quickly get to I see the benefits of being part, again, of this ecosystem. The second point that you raised there, David, around CMOs, I don't think the problem, in my experience, is that CMOs don't want to be part of or have news or, specifically the Washington Post as part of their media mix. They see the value in it. They're readers of our content. CCOs, the same. I think the challenge is that the further you get sort of through the procurement process, if you will, to actually the transactions, that's when we start to really encompass the problem. So both when it's the responsibility of someone that doesn't have the same relationship or appreciation with news, or when it's tech that is, to your point, sort of blocking us without necessarily the sophistication that it needs.
I mean, it's a CYA problem, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't seem like, because it's a lot of, because like to your point, we could invade the brand innovator space and
actually, our space is right next door.
Oh,
so
that's
just
perfect.
come to the Washington Post space.
Yeah, we'll infiltrate, and I don't think many CMOs will be saying, no, we don't want anything to do with the news, because they're talking about purpose and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
But when it filters down, sometimes on the agency level, I'm told, when those plans get put into place, that there is, look, people turn to brand safety vendors, and you're blocking domestic violence. It makes no sense. And there is, in my view, still, and I've heard this repeatedly, this fear of screenshots. Nobody wants to screenshot to ruin their weekend. What do you think needs to happen on the buy side, or does anything need to happen? Is it just I think one of the other questions I have is just maybe it just doesn't work well enough, because these risks would be worth taking. If people return, brands had no problem giving up on their boycotts on YouTube. They had no problem doing that. And
well, I think it's not going to exist the same way it has, right? That we have to agree that the world changes. I think generally we have seen increasing globalization across businesses, and particularly media and content. And I think that creates a different level for various, not every news organization is going to be the same. You mentioned you're a global company. I think that helps multinational, larger national and global advertisers, global audiences, right? I mean, the thing when you are on a platform like a YouTube or a Meta, that's all global content. There are no barriers in that sense, right? So the ability for, and I think where the Washington Post and others like it, like the New York Times will do well, they've been more able to, as larger businesses that are covering more global news, more national news, to be able to get subscribers and advertiser dollars. And I think where the larger problem is probably the more local newspapers, and we've seen that already to some extent. But to the extent that news organizations can create a bit more parity and more of a national and global orientation potentially is also beneficial, because that's increasingly the way that advertisers, both large brands and smaller and medium-sized advertisers, are oriented. It's just the way of the world.
Yeah. So Johanna, do you? I'm good.
So to add it, I think your point on the example of YouTube is a very good one. I think we can help with communication, and influencing is changing a little bit the mindset. But at the end of the day, I think what's going to change it is, can we deliver value for advertisers with those audiences? I mean, that's really the question. And I think, yes, we can. And I think there's a lot of technology. The audience profile is very interesting. I think you can create better attention, engagement. I mean, we are working a lot on these things. And I think that's the key. At the end, it's economically driven.
Yeah,
if we show the value, the dollars will be there. Sorry, I mean, it is an economic machine. We are in a capitalistic society, so just
We're
show
all in
the...
favor of capitalism, yes.
Yeah, so just show the return, just show the return.
And capitalism.
No,
yeah.
show the return on ad spend, whether it's a performance campaign, show the high level of awareness that your branding campaign got, and the dollars will be there. But we have to combine it, because that's not enough. We also have to change the perception, but that's not enough. Then you need to show that the value is there, and I think it's there, and I think it's just our work to prove it.
I think, David, you're doing a really good job of explaining how complex and complicated the work that we're doing is right now. And part of that, and this isn't like a media planner problem. We allowed ourselves to be the metric of success to be sort of reach and efficiency in a world where we didn't really. We weren't able to play there as well as much larger properties. But then we took away actually the value that we bring to our partners, which is not about reach and efficiency and low cost eCPMs. I mean, yes, of course, we can do some of the lower funnel work. It's about that upper funnel brand, that quality engagement with a powerful audience. And again, I think, no, this isn't a Washington Post thing. I think just as an industry, we have a tendency to sort of really swing with the kind of cool, interesting, or the most talked about thing. And reach and scale was that for a really long time. And so that's the place that we found ourselves playing. And I actually think that we are much better as a platform or as a partner when you think about us from this highly engaged, important audience that can do quality work with good ROI.
Well, I mean, that's a great point, because I mean, you mentioned news not as a monolith category,
Yeah.
which is a good reminder, because business news does not have these problems. You know it.
Yeah.
Like, you can sell out of display regularly at the Journal and Bloomberg, and that exists on news pages. How do you change? I mean, look, mostly it seems brands don't want any part of the politics stuff. They don't. I know that there can be study after study that can show this. There's tons of studies that also show that companies lose out when they stop advertising during a recession. Every recession I've been through, I think I've been through 3 or 4, they immediately stop advertising. They don't pay attention to that. The CFO is like, I don't know what you're talking about.
And you don't think they're like, this is your moment to cut through message.
Yeah. I was like, Ad Age has those queued up for every recession, and just like,
how to
let's
get
go.
your ads back
Never
in.
works. How do you? I mean, is it just the fact that you need to segment these, in that you are going to have a section of your inventory that's basically almost unmonetizable through advertising, and it has to be monetized through subscriptions and licensing versus ads, because I don't know if you're going to convince a lot. Like,
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because you are absolutely correct. The content, the politics, the campaign content drives the highest subscriptions. So we're really lucky at the Washington Post that we have a already diversified business model, that we have both a healthy subs and a healthy advertising business. And the content that the subscribers, or drives more subscribers, and actually May was the highest month for subscriptions in the last, I think, 18 months. I have an amazing partner, Carl Wells, who you know, who's leading this business, and we've built a much more sophisticated customer-led paywall. So you're right that the politics coverage, the campaign messaging is not going to be the place where I focus our advertising investment or strategy, really. Now, of course, you can monetize that programmatically, and it's not that it doesn't have any ad value. The ad value, though, is primarily on the audience subscription side. So we put that, and our amazing editorial team continues to break scoops and have amazing work in that space. Excellent. We can monetize it through audience and subscriptions. What's interesting is then when you start to look at other parts of our content portfolio, if you think about it like that. Business, tech, economics, that is the highest converting for subscriptions and the highest generating for advertisers. You're spot on. Like, if you're in a B2B space, or if you're in a vertical content area, and I worked at the FT and at the Journal, that business, the business content, it can resist some of the sort of market volatility that you see in more of the consumer space. So I think that us investing and continuing to grow out our core news product, business, tech, some sports we'd probably put in there as well, because that's sort of the right sort of type of audience. That is a great way for us to grow our advertising business. What's really exciting is the fact that we have also said that that's not all we do. over the last 2-3 years, we have invested very heavily into service journalism. And I know I'm on a podcast, but I'm not sure I love the term service journalism, but it's the how-to, it's the well-being, it's the travel, it's the recipes, it's the content that I think has got a more dynamic relationship with the audience. You're sort of posing questions and getting answers versus the slightly more didactic core news. So now we're saying, actually, this whole bucket of journalism can also be a really great opportunity for us to monetize and diversify our business. We just have to think about it differently. It just shouldn't sit in the same bucket as politics or core news, right? It needs to sit in a sort of differentiated area. And how we monetize that could look really different, from partnerships, maybe affiliate, but I think also in the way you're thinking about micro payments, I think the way that you think about flexible payments, but most importantly, reaching our audiences wherever they are. And that is a moment that the news industry has come to, which is that next generation of news consumers aren't necessarily going to come to the Washington Post to consume their news. They're going to consume it elsewhere, so we have to meet them there.
Yeah. So, Kate, I think one of the big things that I took away from your report was this pronounced shift to performance, right? And it's not like there's streaming, like that is more engagement, but I think about, I joke, like, that performance marketing basically ate the industry. Like it used to be, I used to cover direct marketing, and it was just this backwater. And then all of a sudden it got rebranded performance marketing and it became sexier. But everything has moved to stuff you can measure and that can lead to direct sales. And we're seeing advertising blur with commerce. And I think you've dealt with a lot of that with how to even define what advertising is these days.
Yeah, very tricky. I think blur is the right word, right? I think we're going to continue to see more and more blur, such that we're not having these distinctions between brand upper funnel and DR, direct response lower funnel, that more of it exists within a continuum, within a spectrum, and that every, because there is brand lift to performance ads, and there are elements, could be elements of, purchase tied to a big anthemic CTV campaign. Why not, right? So I think it's partly about not putting things in these rigid buckets that need to exist there. And then also, thinking about the different ways that digital properties can be used. It doesn't have to just be that lower funnel direct response, but it has been, I think, attractive to marketers in the ability to tie media to an outcome, but increasingly we'll be able to see that across more and more surfaces and touch
The
points.
Wanamaker quote is not trotted out as much as it used to be, basically, because you don't have to settle for half not working or not knowing, at least from the view of. So what I worry about, and I want to bring you in on this, David, is that there's a lot of well-meaning panels around Cannes. Not that people talk about one thing in Cannes and do something different, because that would never happen.
No, absolutely not. No.
But I think it's really problematic in the long run if supporting news becomes like this sort of message as if it's like a charity, because we do live in capitalist societies and it needs to perform, in quotes.
I agree. That's why I said, at the end, we can talk about it. It's nice to talk about, but it is a reality in economics. So first, I think in terms of even brand campaigns today, into your performance question, they're looking for measurable outcomes. When we launched Onyx by Outbrain, which is our brand building product, which was different than our performance, we very much focused around proving attention and using a lot of the predictive technologies that drive performance and bringing them to brand awareness. And then the next step of it is when we have the opportunity, we work about 7,000 publishers, is to connect that brand building campaign immediately on the feed into a conversion or a lead or a consideration. So the ability to do all of that for brands, but also on the upper funnel, it's a different world. It's sort of blurry line because they also need to see real return on their dollars. I want to make one more comment on your news pages. So I think going back to that, if I may, for the last time. News is a big category, and politics and elections is one, but there's a lot of other news too. I was just coming out of a meeting with one agency, not yours, another agency, and I tried on him and they said, listen, you have no chance this year when the elections are so controversial and the discourse is what it is to convince a brand on that. I said, okay, But when you look at news, I mean, there's a lot of other things that are not just Trump and Biden or other elections around the world. So I think we just need to continue and work on sort of proving the value of these audiences. And yes, I mean, there's certain things that are going to always be blocked. I think people don't want to be associated with negative political campaigning. I mean, it's a waste of time to try and change that. I agree with you. People don't want to be next to war pages with images. But then you have tons of other news that are just news, I mean, about economics and other things. And by blocking the news section, you're creating a huge damage to society, again, coming back to that. So I think the technology is there to do it, and we're doing it. So we are able today, when we analyze our 7,000 publishers, I know which pages are war-related, which pages are election-related, and what percent it is. And we're trying to package it in a sort of optimized supply path to just do packages that would meet those requirements and still not block out all news.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, there are more than $16 billion of political advertising revenue just this year. So
Yes.
By the way, they will fuel the second half a little bit. So that's why I'm not as negative on the...
The interesting thing about the performance sort of fixation or the moment is that I find that this is quite cyclical, right? So I find that perhaps in a moment when actually CMOs are really being tied to performance of a company, then they go to, you know, much lower funnel again tactics or performance type marketing. They've got to be able to point to their, you know, return on investment. And then within 18 months or less, suddenly realize they've taken their eyes off the brand story and sort of pivot back into the brand story. So I like what you say that actually smart campaigns and smart partners can do both, and like there's a blurred line between it. Just because something's a great brand story doesn't mean it can't actually deliver, you know, leads and demand gen type related activity. But the clearest thing is you've got to set out with the intention, right? Why are you working with the partner? What is the expectation on the ROI, and how can you make sure that you can actually optimize towards that? And one of the things that we haven't talked about here at all is the implications around AI in both advertising in terms of like the actual ecosystem and the efficiencies and the operational efficiencies that it might bring and some of the enhancements to creativity. But I think from a, again, performance point of view, the way that we actually talk about performance or measure it is going to change dramatically very quickly. And so I feel confident that first our quality audience with, you know, the first party data that we have, the premium environment is going to ultimately be able to deliver on those results.
So talk to me more about that. Like, how are you going to be able, because ultimately, I would guess whether it's a buyer or a marketer would say, trying to show me that this is working. Like I've got closed loop attribution systems. I put money in. Like everyone wants a customer vending machine where they feed quarters in and then customers come out. And that is what platforms and retail media are going into the market with. So what's the picture that you paint?
I'm not sure that's why people come to the Washington Post. You know, you talked about this the other week. This is a quality over quantity platform. Our work, the news we're producing, the audience that we curate, that we have, this isn't about scale and efficiency. I've said that already. And I think as such, the performance marketing, attribution type campaigns is not where we are the first partner. I think we can be additive in that space. And we also have a big network. I think something like 200 million uniques off platform of our content. So we can provide some scale, but that's not where I send my team to play, right? I want my team to build really excellent client direct often, but sort of senior level agency relationships that understand the value of news. This isn't a charity. You're not doing us a favor. We're going to give you the opportunity to reach the people that have, again, the impact to change your business outcomes, potentially your political outcomes, and then also some of your like personal decisions. It's important. It can't be put into a bucket of like, oh, did that deliver the lowest funnel, cheapest part of it? That's not where we play.
If you want to grow, and if all the other money is moving to the platforms, you are going to eventually need to be able to create an argument that says, here's why your money is better spent here than on those platforms. And I agree with a point you made earlier around making sure that we're talking about metrics, not just in the way that people maybe have been trained by some of the platforms around what is or isn't important, but actually around really looking at
Tends
what,
to be the metrics they do well on.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about like time spent and engagement as a
But
metric
there's
for
a lot
so
of
long.
proven metrics
Yeah.
that say we deliver to advertisers, otherwise they wouldn't be spending more. So whether it's on
Yeah.
performance or on attention, on engagement and attribution and
That's right.
that, I think these are things that we do, and we need to prove that the value of the audience is phenomenal on the open internet, and that's why advertisers will shift those dollars back from all the other places that are growing in the graphs and, you know.
All right, on that hopeful note, David,
Yes.
Kate, Johanna, thank you so
you.
much for joining me. And thank you to GroupM for hosting us.